have a mean of 0 and a standard deviation of 1. Then they measured the acquisition premium for each of these acquisitions. Okay, so P pre, I'm not going to be able to fit that in there. P pre is the stock price, okay, of the acquired firm, the firm that they're buying, before the acquisition is announced, before anybody has any idea that this CEO is going on a buying binge. Okay, and then P post is the stock price that is actually paid by that CEO or by the acquiring firm, right? So you buy out a firm by offering a stock price to all of the stockholders of the acquired firm that is so high that they're all willing to say, yes, even though this is Larry Ellison, who is the embodiment of evil, I'm still willing to sell my stocks in this otherwise really valuable and wonderful firm so that he can destroy all the value in it through his overconfident merger, but he's paying me so much I'm going to go for it. Okay? So that's P post, that's P pre, and this ratio here is the percentage markup, right? How much above what the stock market was telling us the acquired firm was worth did the CEO eventually actually pay, which is kind of a measure of how much additional value the CEO thinks that they will be able to contribute to the firm they're buying. Right? If it's worth P post to me, I'm Larry Ellison and I'm buying, what was the last thing you bought that was so tragic? PeopleSoft. The friend who worked at PeopleSoft. It was a nightmare. I'm Larry Ellison, I'm buying PeopleSoft. This is what the market thinks PeopleSoft is worth under its current management. This is what I, Larry Ellison, think that PeopleSoft will be worth once I've got my hands on it. Okay? So the difference between the two is the value I think that I will add to PeopleSoft by dint of the sheer fact of being Larry Ellison. And then this ratio here is the percentage, in sort of the premium that they're paying. Okay. Then they went and measured the actual one-year post-acquisition stock return of the acquired firm. How well did they actually do? Okay. And then they regress, right, using ordinary least squares regression, the acquisition premium and the post-acquisition stock return on the index of CEO hubris. Right? And here's what they found. A 1 standard deviation increase in the hubris index, because this index is just the scale is arbitrarily chosen. But a 1 standard deviation increase causes, or I don't want to say causes, because we can't identify causal effect here, but it's related to, perhaps causes, a 17 percentage point increase in the acquisition premium. Now, the average acquisition premium was 49%, 50%. So on average, people thought that they would add 50% to the value of the firm through their magical executive abilities. 17 percentage points of that can be explained by a 1 standard deviation increase in hubris. Okay? In a normal distribution, 2 standard deviations is 2 standard deviations is about 2 standard deviations on either side of the mean is almost all of the data. It's 95% of the data. So roughly speaking, the range of hubris, if it's normally distributed, the range of that index will be 4 standard deviations. So 1 standard deviation is a quarter of the range of hubris, from the least hubristic to the most hubristic. Okay? So the entire range from 0 to fully hubristic explains almost all of the premium, the average premium. And that same 1 standard deviation increase in hubris causes an 8.3 percentage point decrease in the 1-year post-acquisition returns. And the average return, by the way, in general, mergers destroy value for shareholders. And in this data set, the average destruction of wealth was 11% over the first year. Fully 8 percentage points of that can be explained by a 1 standard deviation increase in the hubris of the CEO, which basically means that hubristic, overconfident CEOs, what it suggests is that overconfident CEOs are basically going around engaging in aggressive acquisitions on the basis of overconfidence and then destroying shareholder value because they paid too much. Most of that destruction comes from the fact that they paid too much because of the premium, and then they have to pay off the debt. Okay. Malmondier and Tate. So what's kind of unsatisfying about that is that index of hubris, A, it's not so clear that that's necessarily really overconfidence, and also a lot of those things are correlated with the success of the firm. So it's not a really great test. I think it's really great, fun results. Ulrika Malmondier, who's here at Berkeley, and Jeffrey Tate, who is not, and I can't remember where he is, did roughly the same thing, but they used what I think is arguably a more valid measure of overconfidence, which is how long does the CEO hold company stock options after they become quote-unquote in the money, which is to say that you could sell them, take the money out, and put it in something more diversified. Right? So if your labor income is coming from the firm, then your investment income should mostly be diversified in some other firm. Because if the firm you work for goes broke, you're going to lose your labor income. And if all of your portfolio is also in the company that you work for, this is what happened to people at Enron. They all had a bunch of options and they didn't cash them out and take them out of Enron. So they lost simultaneously their labor income and their investment income. It's a very, very bad idea. When you have options, you should cash them out as soon as you can and put them somewhere else. Not because your firm's no good, but because you want to diversify your risk. Okay? So to the extent that the CEO continues to hold company stock options after the first point in time at which they could, how long they hold them is a measure of their overconfidence in their ability as a CEO at that firm. Right? This is not just a default effect measure. Well, I just didn't switch my portfolio. It's saying you could lose big chunks of money, and you think that it's a good idea to hold on to your options because you think I'm running this thing into the sky, not into the ground. And then they ran a check, which is that they actually looked and saw were they doing the right thing? No. CEOs who hold their stock options longer than a rational model would suggest actually lost money relative to an alternative portfolio that would have been diversified. And so so that becomes their measure of overconfidence, and they regress it on the same left-hand side variables. And they find the same thing. Overconfident CEOs are more likely to pursue mergers and more likely to destroy shareholder value in the process. Okay? And then this is, okay, I say overconfidence has been used to explain why wars are started. Unfortunately, the citations I found on this are all books. I couldn't get the books, so I haven't read them, but I came up with my own story. So this is conjecture on the basis of my study of the history of World War II. I'm not an expert, but let's consider Hitler deciding whether or not to invade Russia. Most people think that Hitler's decision to invade Russia was the beginning of the end of World War II. Okay, so before the beginning of World War II, before Hitler had invaded anybody, okay, he had a prior. This is what our model is going to. This is how we economists tend to think of this in terms of mathematical modeling. Let's say prior to the beginning of the war, he has some prior belief about how good he is. He doesn't know for sure how good he is as a military commander. Highest rank that Hitler ever actually achieved in the German military. Does anyone know? Corporal. That's why Churchill denigrated him by calling him Corporal Hitler. So he has some prior belief about how good of a military commander he is on the basis of information that he gathered as a corporal, in which his job was basically to run messages along the trenches in World War I. His prior is actually a distribution. It's not that he thinks I'm on a scale of 1 to 100, I'm a 85. It's he thinks there's some distribution of probabilities of how good I am, right? And let's say that his prior belief is that that distribution is skewed, and the average, well, that wouldn't be the average. Where would the average be? The average would be here, let's say. And so sometimes we think of his prior belief as his belief about this entire distribution of possible skills that he might have, and sometimes we think of his prior belief as just the expectation of that distribution, the average value of that distribution, okay? So, he's like, well, I don't know. Let's say I'm a random draw from among all military commanders who happen to have become the dictator of a large, heavily armed country. So this is his belief about the distribution of ability level of all such dictators, okay? And that's the average of it, let's say. And so that's his prior, his best guess as to his ability level, okay? And then so that's his prior. Then he's going to get a bunch of signals, right? So the prior is kind of like, this is a distribution of base rates, yeah? And then he's going to get a bunch of signals. And what are the signals? The signals are Poland, Norway, Denmark, Holland, Belgium, and France, right? Blitzkrieg in action. And he basically rolled through all of these countries, some of which were fantastically well armed. Right? Poland and France had big armies. And he just rolled right over them. So he got a bunch of signals, okay, as to his ability. And he then revised his prior. He says, look, I'm not a random draw from the distribution of military ability across all megalomaniacal dictators, okay, of whom there were significantly more than one at that time. I got some information about where on this distribution I am. Right? So we could draw a new distribution of what he thinks his ability is. He still doesn't know for certain, but his distribution is probably going to be revised upwards, right? Because he's gotten a bunch of signals which he thinks are draws from this distribution. They're all these high draws, right? What he's not taking into account is the fact that the underlying process is maybe different than what he thought, right? And so these signals include a random component. He got lucky in his first 6 conquests, okay? He got lucky on the fact that the French had just not noticed the invention of the tank. He got lucky on the fact that France was torn by anti-communist sentiments, and that a lot of people thought that an alliance with Hitler would have been favorable to an alliance with the Soviet Union. And on the basis of this overconfidence, he invades Russia, and then he discovers that, in fact, he is at best a so-so military commander. Okay, he basically got spanked. So we can think of his true ability level, as being akin to we've been talking about hypotheses, right? So this is a distribution of possible hypotheses. One hypothesis is that he's really good, and the probability of that is the height of this curve here. Another possibility is that he's average, right? And so the probability of that is up here. Another possibility is that he's really good. So this is a distribution of probabilities of a whole continuous range of different hypotheses. And then he's going to get a bunch of signals that are partially informative about his actual ability. And then what we would like is to see him applying Bayes' rule to update his belief about his true ability given the signals that he's received. Let's see a little bit more evidence, and then maybe it'll point us towards a mathematical explanation of things. Okay? Psychologists have tended to explain overconfidence as a need to boost self-esteem. And if you're Hitler, whose father died, I think his father abandoned him, mother died when he was a teenager, spent about 4 years living, yes, on the street, on the sidewalk, under a bridge in Vienna, as a not very good landscape painter selling to tourists on the sidewalk before being drafted into the German military, maybe he needed a self-esteem boost. And so his overconfidence was a way for him to boost his self-esteem. Okay? This is hard to reconcile with evidence of underconfidence. Okay? So here's a couple of studies. Van Eeperen in 1992 found that most professional soccer players, I think this is in Europe, most professional soccer players believe that they have below average ability to head a soccer ball. Below average for all professional soccer players. Okay? I'm going to go on a limb and try to pronounce that name. Winchell, Kruger, and Sims. I think these were college students. I'm not sure. Average subject believed that their chance of beating another randomly selected subject on a quiz about indigenous vegetation in the Amazon was just 6%. Right? So this is a shocking degree. It can't be right. That can't be the average of averages, right? So Kruger comes along and says, hey, look, there's a pattern here. And he asks people to rank their ability level on a bunch of different tasks, some easy ones, using a computer mouse, driving a car, riding a bicycle, saving money, and some difficult ones, telling jokes, playing chess, juggling, and computer programming. These difficulty ratings were determined by an independent set of subjects who rated them, their abilities, and he put their average ability ratings. And so he ranks them by difficulty. And what he finds, this is where people think they are. This is the average percentile ranking. Okay, so the average percentile ranking is, if it's above 50, then that suggests on average people are overconfident. And if it's below 50, that suggests that they're underconfident. And sure enough, people are overconfident on easy tasks, and people are underconfident on hard tasks. Now, if you're Adolf Hitler, and you have several thousand panzer tanks formed into highly, highly trained panzer corps, and all of the rest of Europe has been basically pursuing has either been pursuing pacifism for the last 20 years, or as in the Soviet Union, they've been tearing themselves apart with civil wars and political purges. Rolling over the first 6 countries turns out to be an easy task. Okay, and so people wind up revealing themselves as overconfident on easy tasks and underconfident on difficult tasks. Now Kruger, I'm going to have to finish this up on Thursday, but let's see how far we can get. Kruger explained this. He said this can't just be about boosting self-esteem, but it's still an ego thing. He called it egocentrism. And basically what he's saying is that subjects tend to focus on their own ability, which is typically going to be high on easy tasks and low on hard tasks, and they ignore the fact that everyone else is pretty much like them. Right? So this is kind of a little bit of the same quality as base rate neglect. People focus on something that's salient, their own ability, and they ignore something that's less salient, which is everybody else's ability, and the fact that everybody else is typically on average going to be kind of like them. Okay. Moore and Healy. This is Don Moore, who I'm not sure, is he still here? Is he still visiting here? Does any of the GSI? He was here for a while. Has he gone home? He works at Carnegie Mellon, but he was here for like a year. They've got a radically different explanation. What was the answer? He's still here? Did he actually move here? No, he's just still here. Great guy, you should talk to him. He figured out, mathematically, that you can actually get over and underconfidence from a perfectly rational application of Bayes' rule. Okay? You can get people making systematic inferential mistakes about their own ability relative to the average if you model them as applying Bayes' rule with perfect rationality under certain conditions which he then goes and experimentally tests. So this is going to require me to introduce you to a piece of probability theory, which economists make use of a lot, which is called the normal learning model. Okay? So let me set it up, and hopefully I'll have time to buzz through it once, and then we'll talk about it again on Thursday, and perhaps your GSIs will comment on it as well. Okay, so suppose you're taking a test, score between 0 and 100, and you don't know how difficult the test is. But we're going to assign a value D to the test and say that D is its difficulty rating, which is basically going to be exactly the average score of the class on that test. So if D is high, that means it's an easy test, and if D is low, it's a very hard test. Okay, and then we're going to say that D, that little wiggle there, means is distributed with a normal distribution with mean MD and variance VD. Okay, so let's see. I think I want to make this not too big. Okay, so here's D across all possible exams that you could see, And let's just say that on average, people score, the average class score on all exams is 50, but there's a distribution, and it's some normal distribution like that, and it has some variance VD, right? So maybe it's really peaky, maybe it's really spread out. Okay, and then your score on that, so this is before you see the exam, you don't know how hard it is. Your prediction of how hard it would be is just going to be the average over all of the different, you know the true distribution, and you know what the average is. So your prior guess on how hard any randomly selected exam is going to be would be just the average, right, MD. But you don't actually know. Then you get a signal, which is your score. Okay, so let's say that your score is going to vary around this mean. Sorry, it's going to vary around. Sorry, it's going to vary around D. It's going to vary around the class average by some idiosyncratic component Li. So I indexes individuals, and L is this idiosyncratic component, which is distributed also normally with a mean of 0. Which is to say that on average, sometimes you beat the market and sometimes you don't, right? So there's 0, this is Li, and we're going to have a distribution. Let's make it a little bit less geeky, maybe something like that. Okay, so sometimes you're above the average for the class on a particular exam, and sometimes you're below. And then your score is going to be the sum of those two things, right? It's going to be the class average on the exam plus your idiosyncratic component, which might be positive or negative. So your score, and this is just a feature of the normal distribution, your score Xi is also going to be distributed normally with a mean of MD, right, which is just the sum of means, MD plus 0, and with a variance that is also the sum of variances. Okay, so your score Xi, on average, across all exams, sorry, let me make that, I want to make it a lot less peaky. Okay, so on average across all exams, you're going to vary around that same mean, but with a much larger variance. Okay, so what we're going to do, okay, and then we're going to assume that everyone in the class has the same distribution of ability, sometimes better than average, sometimes below average. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to give you a series of signals. Take the exam, see what your score is, and then tell us what you think the average score for the rest of the class was, which is to say, how hard do you think that test was? And what we're going to see, and I'll show you the rest of this model on Thursday, what we're going to see is that if you apply Bayes' rule perfectly and take the signal, xi, once you know your score, and use it to update your belief about how hard the exam was, b, your prediction or your best guess, your inference as to how hard the exam was, is always going to be in between your score and the average across all exams. So you're going to update towards your score. Boy, I did really well. That must have been fairly easy. But you're not going to update all the way to your score. So on easy exams, you're going to update and think it was somewhat easier than usual, but not that other people's performance was not as good as yours. And on hard exams, you're going to do exactly the opposite. And so you're going to get this pattern of over and under confidence with a perfectly rational application of Bayes' rule. All right, more on Thursday.